In January 1912, two men set out on a race to conquer the most unforgiving place on Earth, a race that would push the boundaries of human endurance and ambition. They battled the biting cold, the savage winds, and the ever-present threat of death. One man would succeed. The other would die, along with his dreams. But here's the twist. History doesn't remember the man who won. It remembers the one who lost. This is not just the story of who reached the South Pole first. It is the story of why history sometimes remembers tragedy more vividly than triumph. It was the first time a human reached the South Pole, and yet the winner was forgotten. To most people, reaching the South Pole was once a distant dream. The icy wastes of Antarctica were not just unexplored, they were unforgiving. Anyone who ventured there would have to contend with extreme cold, blizzards that could strip flesh from bones, and the crushing isolation of endless white. Yet, in the early 1900s, two men stood poised to make that dream a reality. Robert Falcon Scott of Britain and Roald Amundsen of Norway. Both had their eyes on the same prize, the South Pole, a spot on the map that had never been touched by human feet. Scott and Amundsen were not the only ones with dreams of the pole. But unlike Scott, Amundsen didn't set out for pride. He set out to conquer the Earth, pure and simple. To him, it was not enough to be the first. He wanted to survive. And survive he did, because unlike Scott, Amundsen wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to come home. Amundsen's approach was clinical, cold, and focused. Every decision was about survival. He knew that the key to conquering the pole wasn't bravery, but preparation. He had trained for years with the Inuit, learning how to survive in the extreme cold and how to use sled dogs. He planned for everything. Scott, on the other hand, was a man of ideals. His team was outfitted with scientific instruments and specialized gear, designed for research as much as exploration. They carried everything they thought they might need, but in the end, it was too much to handle. The two teams fought the elements for months. The polar ice was relentless, but Amundsen's team moved with precision. They set up camp with military-like discipline, always aware of their fuel, food, and rest. But Scott's team, they struggled with everything, except their resolve. They pushed through with courage, but the cold, the fatigue, the wrong equipment, and ultimately, the exhaustion took its toll. On January 17, 1912, Robert Falcon Scott and his weary men arrived at the South Pole. But what they saw when they reached their destination was something they never expected. A flag. A Norwegian flag. The South Pole had already been conquered. For the first time, humanity had reached the southernmost point on Earth. But Amundsen had won by more than a month. Scott's journey didn't end at the pole. Supplies ran low. The weather worsened. Scott and his men, exhausted and demoralized, could not make it. The weather worsened. Scott and his men, exhausted and demoralized, could not make it. They perished just 11 miles from their final depot. Their bodies would not be found until November of that year. For Amundsen's men, it was different. They had planned every step, every decision, and after they reached the pole, they turned back immediately, following the same methodical approach. They survived. And after they reached the pole, they turned back immediately, following the same methodical approach. They survived. They returned to civilization as heroes. Amundsen returned to Norway, where he was hailed as a hero. Telegrams were sent from across the world, congratulating him on his achievement. But Amundsen's triumph was overshadowed by the tragedy of Scott and his men. Scott's death was romanticized. Why? Because Scott's journey, his failure, was tragic. It had all the ingredients for legend: courage, loss, and the nobility of a man who would give everything. Amundsen, on the other hand, was just too cold, too calculated. His success was not built on heroism, but on preparation, on strategy. History remembers those who fall with honor. It remembers those who sacrifice everything, who give their lives for their cause. But does it remember those who succeed because they were ready? Amundsen's name might not roll off the tongue easily, but Amundsen didn't just reach the South Pole. He showed us what it takes to survive in the harshest conditions. In the end, Amundsen didn't just conquer the South Pole. He conquered the very idea of exploration itself, one based not on dreams of glory, but on the cold, hard facts of survival. And that is perhaps the greatest lesson of all. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of history's greatest, but often overlooked adventures, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Be sure to ring the bell for more incredible stories from history.